Welcome, and we'll start off with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Find the place. Here we are. Make sure I find the place. Here we are.
Where are
So
we? Torah
we-
Temimah?
Yes, we are in Torah Temimah. We have a
Okay.
good part to lead off. And it all had to do with that little verse that said, he was told that his father Jacob was sick.
And would you remind me that we're in chapter 48, right?
We are, I'll double check. Yes.
In which verse?
And the verse is verse 2, I believe. Let me see. No, verse 1. Verse 1. And we were talking about, why did they say it was Ephraim? And Torah Temimah is able to come up with a rationale with some supportive evidence that people never got sick before, and that the Midrash is that Jacob prayed that people should be given some warning before they pass away from the world. So we talked about that. And then the question was, why did Jacob, he had this paragraph here, several that talked about, well, why did Jacob need this? Why did he ask for this? And basically the conclusion was so that the person could essentially give an ethical will to his children. That Jacob wants to give people time to come and gather around the person before they actually pass on, to give them that opportunity. So here we go. The Hine Gemara, and indeed in the Gemara, lo nitba'er, it isn't clarified, or fan hamita, exactly how death took place. Kodem shebikesh Yaakov chulsha kodamit. Before Jacob asked for people to become enfeebled prior to death. In other words, how exactly did death take place? Rak b'Yalkut, but in the Yalkut Shmoni, it's another major midrash. Parshat Lech, for the Parsha of Lech Lecha, Remez Ayin Zalet. So the Yalkut Shmoni is divided into, the little subsections are called Remazim, and it's Remez Ayin Zayin, 77. Mevoar, it's clarified, Shayu Metim Al Yedei Atisha, that they would die by means of a sneeze. So they'd sneeze and it was over. That's how they died. V'hainu shahaya adam, or tesh, I think, or I can't, tesh is a past tense. So that is a person, adam, a person would sneeze, v'nishmato yotzeit menichirav, and his soul would depart from his nostrils. But ofan, and this sort of reflects the way sheba'alo, that the neshama entered him, kamosha katuv, as it states in Genesis, right early on, vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim, and he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, or it's the soul of life, a living soul. V'lachein haminhag, and for that reason there is this custom, keshe adam or tesh, that when a person sneezes, omrim l'chayim or l'shalom, they say to him l'chayim or l'shalom, it should be for life and for peace. Mipnei she'az nechshav, because at that particular time, right prior to Jacob's prayer, it was considered l'sha'at sakana. It was considered to be a dangerous moment, a moment of danger. V'Iyein brachot nun gimel aleph, and look and check out brachot, page 53, side 1. Ein omrim marpeh beveit hakneset. You don't say this Gesundheit, right? You don't say healing in the synagogue. Mipnei bitul Torah, on account of taking time away from studying Torah. Upiresh Rashi, and Rashi explains, La Adam Hamit Atesh, he simply says that a person who sneezes, Rashi is saying this, right? Rigilon Lomar Asuta. It's customary to say to that person, again, Gesundheit, right? Remedy. Ad kan lashono. And that's the end of the quote from Rashi. Mashma, that implies the eno mitzad hadin, that saying Gesundheit to someone who sneezes isn't a halacha. I mean, it isn't something that one must do. Elamin hag ba'alma. It just indicates that it's simply a custom. It's a custom. Aval, however, by Yalkut, in the Yalkut again, Umidrash Rabbah Sham, and in the Midrash Rabbah referring to that particular passage, Ita halashon chayav adam. The language is structured as chayav adam, a person is obligated. But atisha, when there is a sneeze, lahodot lakadosh baruch hu, to acknowledge the Holy One, blessed be He, v'chuli, etc. V'tzarich lomar, and so one has to conclude, de lahadam atzmo, that to the person himself, the one who sneezes, hu chiyuv, it's a chiyuv, it's an obligation. Ula acherim, but to other people, hu minhag musari, but it's simply a nice custom, a nice custom. V'derech eretz, again, a common decency. V'hinei al kol panim, and look, I mean, under these circumstances, lahama'atesh atzmo hu chayav, and nevertheless, for the person who sneezes himself, that is a chiyuv. They're obligated to say that. V'tzarich iyun, and one has to one has to investigate further, look into this. She'ein nohagin bo, that this is not the custom. It's sort of interesting that despite these particular statements, that isn't the custom. V'yesh omrim, and there are those who say, b'sha'at atisha, and there are those who say that at the moment of a sneeze, you should say, lishuacha kiviti Hashem, to your salvation I hope, Lord. V'ulai zehu mimankor hachiyuv hamavoar, and perhaps this is the source of this obligation that has been explained. Aval lo nitpashet minhag zeh. However, this custom has not become common. This is not a common custom. And of course, and that's the end of this comment. And of course, those are words that Jacob uses a little later on when he's in the midst of quote, blessing the tribes or prophesy or giving them Musa or giving them his ethical will. He uses, in the middle of it, he says, Lishuatcha kiviti Hashem.
I think it's interesting that when you sneeze, your heart stops for a moment.
And that may have been, that is very interesting, actually. So, yeah. So I thought that was sort of a really interesting, I mean, first of all, it's very different stylistically from the Rashi. You notice how economical Rashi's comments are. And the Torah Temimah, gives essays. I mean, he basically writes essays about his comments. But first of all, I mean, I think he's such a sharp thinker. Everything he says is generally, I find anyway, very interesting and informative and stuff like that.
So as far as I understand, your heart does not stop when you sneeze.
Okay.
That's just a myth, but there are functions that are less available to you. For instance, your eyes tend to close. And if you try to keep your eyes open, sometimes it makes the sneeze go away because they kind of don't work together.
Or he'll get locked cross-eyed. I'm not sure. No, but no, I don't know if it is true or not, but I really did believe when I heard that your heart does skip a beat.
I believed it a long time ago too, but I have since read that it is not true.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did not know. Good. It's funny how we all hang on to certain beliefs
until we learn otherwise. That's true. I mean, I feel bad when I learned I've taught somebody something wrong because at the time I believed it to be right. It's awesome responsibility as a teacher, isn't it?
Yes. Does this come under the rubric of alternate facts?
you know, it can, but
I-
I've heard more egregious examples from other teachers, so I'm all right.
That reminds me of the rabbi who had to do a funeral for a person who was thoroughly wicked, and he didn't know what to say for the eulogy. And when he came to say it, he give the eulogy. He said, "It's true that so and so was considered a wicked person, but compared to his brother, he was an absolute saint." So, at
It's
any
like,
rate,
well, it should have been done in the way that we just learned that you're supposed to do it, where you talk about someone else and
yes.
then,
Well,
Oh, very
well,
good.
how was this person a nice person? Well, his brother, um,
yes, what we were saying before, right? That you imply it by, yes,
yeah.
exactly,
Mm.
through implication. Yes. And I thought at first I thought you were referring to something else, which is, that this little piece that we read, I thought was just so informative, and just the way, the Torah Temimah, Baruch HaLevi Epstein, supports his statements. He is so knowledgeable. His knowledge is pretty much encyclopedic, and he's quoting from all over the place, and how he puts it together so that it makes some sense. This is one reason why I love reading source material, and partially for the reason that I feel that way I'm given a better how can I put it, to bead on what is genuine and what isn't, because I hear people making statements about Judaism, and then when you go back to the sources, it isn't exactly the way. It may not be in any way the way people say it is. So it's just these common apprehensions, and I think first of all, I love source material. I think it's interesting, but also for the fact that when you're dealing with sources, they're the sources, and they're not necessarily, not to say that they can't be ambiguous. There's no question about that, but at least you have a better sense of what the reality is. At
Well, it
least,
certainly makes sense to invoke God's name in thanks if you
yes,
believe that at one time people died because of a sneeze,
correct,
or in, relation to the sneeze.
right, exactly. And people now can understand why people say Gesundheit. It puts a lot more of some traction to that. We're going to go back into the Rashi now. Vayaged leYaakov. Let me just make sure we've got. Yeah, remember Joseph. Joseph has been told that his father is sick. That was the previous, and he takes his two sons,
Okay, that's verse
Manasseh
2
and
then.
Ephraim. Right, just to go back over that.
Okay,
Vayaged. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's verse 2.
Yes, we're coming to verse 2. We're doing verse 2
Okay.
now. Vayaged leYaakov. This was told to Jacob. Vayomer hine vincha Yosef ba. And he was told, your son Joseph is coming, Elecha, to you. Vayitchazek Yisrael. And Israel strengthened himself. He gathered his strength. Vayeshev al hamita. And he sat on the bed, on the couch. He sat, in other words, essentially, my understanding would be that he sat up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, now somebody said to Joseph, your father is sick, and now here it says, Hamagid Yaakov, right? And again, this is sort of elliptical. It doesn't say who said to him. So Hamagid Yaakov, the one who told Jacob, told him. V'lo piresh mi, and it doesn't say who it was. V'harbe mikraot kitzrei lashon, and there are many such elliptical scriptural verses. It's not an unusual thing. Vayitchazek Israel, and Israel strengthened himself. He gathered his strength. Amar, he thought, af al pi shehu b'ni, despite the fact that he is my son, melechu, he is still a king. He's still a sovereign. Achalek lo kavod. I will give him honor. I will pay him honor. Mikan, and from this one derives shechokin kavod lamalchut, that one has to pay honor to the king, to sovereignty. V'chein Moshe, and in a similar way, Moses, chalak chavod lamalchut, he also showed respect to the governing, to the king. And this is what he said. So he says to Pharaoh, "Vayerdu kol avadecha ela elai, and all your servants will come down to me." And he still refers by saying to Pharaoh, your servants, right? These your servants. He is still referring to them in the third person, and your servants is still saying to him that he's king. V'chein Eliyahu, and likewise Elijah, vayishanes motnav v'gomer. This is when he had to go. He was told he needed to go and tell Ahab, who was a wicked king, right? But it says he girded his loins. In other words, Elijah ran to I think to catch up with Ahab's chariot. So again, by running to go see him, he was showing honor and respect to the Malchut, to the sovereign. Going on. Here we are. Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef. Jacob said to Joseph, El Shaddai nir'ah elai beluz be'eretz Kna'an. Shaddai, God Shaddai, appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan. Vayivarech oti, and he blessed me. Vayomer Elai, and he said to me, Hineni mafracha v'hirbiticha. Behold, I will make you fruitful, and I will multiply you. Unataticha lekahal amim, and I shall make you into a community of nations. Let's see if there's any. Yep. V'natati et haaretz, and hazot, and I will give this land lazaracha, to your seed, to your offspring, acharecha, after you, achuzat olam, as a perpetual inheritance. So, v'nataticha lekahal amim, and I shall make you into a community of nations. Bisrani. So, in a sense, Rashi is he's using Jacob's words. He's putting Jacob's words into a different in a different kind of way. So it's as if Jacob was saying to him, Basrani, he foretold me, Sha'atidim latzeit mimeni, that in the future, od kahal, another community of amim and people from me. In other words, that I would sire, beget more children. For afalpi, and despite the fact, sha'amarli goy ukahal goim, even though he said to me, a nation and a community of nations, okay, goy amarli al binyamin, when he used the term goy, that was referring to Benjamin. Kahal goyim, but when he said kahal goyim, which would have been more than Benjamin, harei shnayim, this would be another two. Levad mi binyamin, apart from Benjamin. Veshuv lo nolad li ben, but I didn't have another child. Didn't have anybody after Benjamin. Limdani, so he taught me, God was trying to communicate to me, to teach me, sha'atid, that in the future, echad mishvati, one of my children, one of my tribes, right, will split, lechalek, to split one of those tribes. Va'ata, and now, ota matana ani noten lecha, that gift I'm giving to you. So God was saying that one of my children would in a sense, that that the offspring of that child would split in two, that would become another two tribes, fully fledged tribes. And I'm giving it to you. Are there any questions about this? A little convoluted. Do you have any concerns about what we just said or questions? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as saying that you're okay. We can continue.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. And to continue this, okay. Va'ata, and there we go. And now, so this Rashi is in a sense explaining to us the connection of this little piece, this sentence, to this sentence by exploding out or drilling down or giving us a better understanding of what the implications of this sentence was. Va'ata, and now, shnei vanecha, your two sons, hanoladim lacha be'eretz Mitzrayim, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, ad bo'i elecha Mitzrayma, until I came to you in Egypt, lihaim, I consider them mine. Ephraim and Manasseh, Kiruvain v'Shimon. Ephraim and Manasseh will be like Reuben and Shimon, Yuli. They will be mine. I will consider them my sons. Your two children, I will consider my sons. Hanoladid lacha, etc., who were born to you before I arrived to see you. Ad bo'i elecha, till I came to see you. Lifnei bo'i, in other words, prior to my coming elecha, to you, klomar, that is to say, shenoldu misheparashta mimeni, that were born after you were separated from me, ad shebati el etzlacha, until I came to you. In other words, until I saw you. In other words, all those years that you were separated, whatever children you had, those two children are considered mine, my own. Lihem, they're mine. Becheshbon, in the number, when you number, Sha'ar Banai, Haim Lito, okay, Banai Haim, in the counting of my other children, Litol, in order to take Chelek, a portion, Ba'aretz or Be'eretz, let's just see what it says. Yeah, Ba'aretz Ish Kenegdo, each person a portion. So in other words, just like Reuven and Shimon well, it wouldn't be Levi. Levi did not get a portion, but the other tribes were given specific territory. So Ephraim and Manasseh, as tribes, would be given specific territory. Umoladetcha asher holadata acharehem, and those children, those offspring, which you give birth to after them, or which you beget after them, lachayiyu, they will be considered your children, not my children, but your children. Al shem achehem yikra'u benachalatam, according to their brothers, yikra'u benachalatam, they will be considered when they inherit the land. In other words, any other children will receive territory either in Ephraim or Manasseh, but that's where they're going to receive their territory. They're not going to be the territory of whatever. Umoladetcha v'gomer, and your children, your offspring following. Im tolid od, if you should beget any more children, lo hiyu b'minyan banai, they are not counted in the number of my children. Ela betoch shiftei Ephraim and Manasseh, but rather within the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, yiyu nichlalim, they will be considered, they'll be counted, absorbed. V'lo yehei lahem shem bashvatim, and they will not have a name amongst the tribes, le'inyan hanachala, with regard to the inheritance. V'afalpi shenechlaka haaretz, and despite the fact that when the land is divided up, le'minyan gulgalotam, it is divided up according to each person, right? Gulgulat is actually a skull, but it's saying according to each individual is really what it's saying. Ki dichtiv, just as it's written in the Torah, l'rav tirbu, to the many you will give much, nachalato, their inheritance. In other words, if the tribe was a very large tribe, had a large population, then it possibly would be getting more territory. V'chol ish ve'ish natal b'shaveh, and every individual took the same amount, chutz min habechorot, with the exception of the bechorot, the firstborn, who took a double portion. Michol makom, nevertheless, lo nikra'u shvatim, they were not going to be called tribes, ella elu, only the children and Ephraim and Manasseh. So let's see. He's got a parenthesis in here, lahatil goral, meaning to cast the lot, because that's the way, haaretz, regarding the land, leminyan shemot hashvatim, according to the number of the names of the tribes. V'nasi lechol shevet v'shevet, and the prince of each and every tribe, u'degalim lazeh v'lazeh, and each tribe, of course, had its own banner. And the point is that any other children that Joseph might have following Ephraim and Manasseh would not be, they wouldn't be a prince coming from one of those children, or they would not, those other children would not be identified as distinguished tribes. This is probably a good place to stop. I'm going to put in a marking here. Right here. Okay. And I'm going to stop the share and see if any of you have any impressions or any thoughts that you'd like to share at this time.
I'm sorry I'm going to miss tomorrow because you're going to get to the part where he blesses Yaakov, blesses Ephraim and Manasseh.
Right,
which
God
is
willing.
a great part.
Yes.
And there's a lot of Rashi before that, so we'll see.
Oh,
Yeah, I
all
know.
right.
Agree.
Huge amounts.
And then it's at the end of Sefer Breshit. So
Right. God willing.
I just want to say I'm sorry I had to keep jumping up. I'm doing something a little bit shady.
It's not shady if you're sharing it. Remember, I'm recording this. Do you want me to stop recording?
Yeah, you better stop recording.
Okay, let me say goodbye to everyone. I'll have to keep them all in suspense. Okay.
Won't tell.
Take care. 1 second.